start. First, any question? Okay. So, where are we? So we are exploring, experimenting with different web services, cloud web services. We already covered the key services in the compute area. So although we are not using it anymore, and I hope you stop it, otherwise you will at some point pay. We learn how to create and use an instance of EC2. Then we move from a server-based architecture to a serverless by essentially, in our case, moving all the APIs that we have in the web application from the Tomcat server running on the EC2 to a bunch of Lambda functions. And that's what we are. Then, a couple of weeks ago, we started using storage, the storage, in particular S3. And I think we did a number of applications with that. Now, last week, we began using RDS to have a database, okay? Which is also a very common, basic, useful web service of cloud platform, in particular AWS. Stop. If you cannot do it, I'll do it later. Okay. Then, things to remember from what we did last week. Okay? We are, so RDS is essentially a managed service, which basically means you pay more, you do less. The cost is higher because the maintenance is taken care by AWS. Maintenance meaning the updates, the patches in the software. Maintenance means the backups according to what you have configured. Maintenance means security, although you have to do a few things that we will do today. But it's a managed service, okay? So that's the reason very likely you will see that your credit diminishes in the upcoming weeks. Still, I don't think you will run out of credit. But it may be a very good idea to, because your application is not yet, it's not used by anybody else than you. So when you don't need the database or that you are not using it, then it may be a good idea to just stop it. I don't know in your case, but in my case, when I stop the database, it's automatically started again after 7 days. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Right. Now, the only thing that we did last week, and I hope this is working for everybody, if not, let me know. We create RDS instance. In fact, what is happening is that AWS launch an EC2, and then in that EC2, install whatever is needed, the operating system, to run the kind of database that you configure. In our case, was a MySQL, so very likely the EC2 is going to be that AWS launch for us to have the RDS, is probably a Linux machine, and then install the MySQL with the configuration that we decided. Also, it gives us a user, which, as I said, It doesn't have the same privilege that a root user. It's a bit less than a root user. Okay? So there are things that you will not be able to do on that RDS, even if you are the admin. You are the admin, but you are not the root. And it gave you a password. And then we use that password to connect with a MySQL client from our laptop to the RDS. The MySQL client, it doesn't matter what you have. In my case, I have just a typical MySQL client. In your case, if you're running Windows, you may want to use SQL Workbench or whatever it's called. Okay? It is the same. You just need to put you just need to put the admin and the password, and it will work. It will work as long as you do two things. First, you configure your RDS to be public. If it's not public, cannot be accessed. Okay. That you do it in that you modify the RDS, and this, I think it's an additional configuration. You just click public. The second thing that you need to do, because remember you are inside an EC2, is to change the firewall so that you allow connection with the MySQL Aurora protocol on the port 3306 from all. I mean, unless you know exactly what is the IP of your laptop at all time, you just make it for all. Okay? And then doing all that, last week we were able to do MySQL H, and here the endpoint of your RDS. Then we were able to do U, admin, and then P, and then pass the password, and you connect, right? Yes. How many had that? How many of you had that? No? Right. So we are gonna continue from there. So please, when things don't work, Friday, you can call me, you can come, okay? Otherwise, I cannot stop the class to catch up with those who have not done it, but I need to go from here on, okay? So those who doesn't have it, will just take note, because you will have to do this later. And if at some point there is a pause, then I will go and help you out. But please, Friday, okay? By the way, this Friday I cannot, because I have to give out in a conference. Okay, so what are we going to do today? So this is okay, but that's not what we want. What we want, like in any web application, is that there will be there will be an API that actually will connect with the RDS and get some and do something on that database. It could be select some, get some information. It could be modify some information. It could be the typical thing, the typical CRUD action that you do on a database. Now, obviously, this API is going to be a Lambda. We don't have any more an EC2, right? So it's going to be a Lambda. So we need to learn, today we need to learn how to connect the Lambda, as we did with S3, right? We learned how to use the SDK of AWS to connect from the Lambda to the, in this case, an RDS, our RDS. And of course, we are going to need some dependency that we will need to add to the POM of our Lambda, our new project. And that's it. So very similar to what we did in the case of S3, what we wanted is to get, let's say, a file from S3, from our Lambda. And then the Lambda will just pass that information to the client. There is a problem, okay, which makes these things, which seem so simple, a bit messy. And the problem is that this RDS is a MySQL. Okay? MySQL does not belong to AWS. MySQL is an open source project that was developed way before RDS existed. And right? So that means that somehow between RDS and MySQL, they need to agree on something because the things of MySQL are not and the things, for example, the users. The user of MySQL are not under the control of AWS. So this is not what, so the user of S3 are the same user that you declare in IAM, because S3 is AWS, right? But now we are talking about a different, animal. Different animal. So MySQL has nothing to do with and the key thing is the users and the credentials. Users and credentials. So the user and credentials to access S3 were the user and credentials of IAM. The user and credential to access MySQL are not the user and credential of IAM. Are different. And are not taken care, they are not controlled, they are not managed by IAM. Are managed by ourselves. Now, right? So we are going to create MySQL user with credentials. Okay? We already have one. Okay, we have admin with the password. Those are the admin and the password are not. The password of the admin was given to us by AWS because AWS created the MySQL instance, right? But that's all MySQL is, that's all RDS is going to do for us. Any other user, and we will have to create user because it's a really bad idea to access a database as a root. And even a worse idea to put the password of a database in a root. Okay? So we are going to create users. Now, so for example, we are creating the user Cloud26. Even if the name, you may have a user Cloud26, I do, as an IAM, but that user is different. Okay? So if you get confused, change the name. Now, what about the credentials for that user? How do you access your database? You have a database, right? Not this database. You have data. You have work with databases, right? So how do you access your database? Huh? How do you access? With a password. With a password, right? Now, when you write your web, you have written web application, right? I'm sure. And you have a database, right? How does your web application access, your API access the database? How? Huh? Huh? So you write, you put the credentials in your code. In a configuration file in your code, right? In your project, right? Now, we don't want to do that. We could do that, okay? So we could easily create a user. Create the user, get the password for the user, as you have done until now in any time you actually access MySQL. Write the lambda. Lambda is Java, right? In our case, it's Java. You have done it many times. You know how to do it. You just use the driver in Lambda in Java to connect to that RDS, which is public, and for which you have the endpoint. And then in your code or in a configuration file, put the user that you're going to use to access the database and the credential. Right? We could do that, no problem. No problem from the point of view of the program, no problem. Okay? But we can do something better. So, in any modern application, you don't have credentials yet. Okay? For security reasons, for many reasons, you don't have you have credentials, but you don't have password. So what are we gonna do? In modern MySQL, it's not only like other database management system, modern database management system, not only accept password as credential, but also tokens. Okay? The difference, I guess, is that the password is actually safe in some table in the database, so that the database management system can check when you try to access, while the token is more kind of a negotiation between the database management system and at the moment of the access. So nothing is kept permanently in the database, and that obviously provides more security. Okay? Now, as I say, it's a negotiation. Now, the negotiation is between whom? Well, because the MySQL is here, it's going to be between the MySQL and RDS. Okay? What do I mean? I mean that we are going to access from our Lambda, we are going to access from our Lambda, or actually from our command line interface. If we have time, we will do it from the command line interface afterwards. But from the Lambda, what we are going to do is to use a method, part of the SDK, to generate a token that AWS and RDS, AWS and MySQL has agreed to be a valid credential. Okay? So we are going to do that. So we are going to use the AWS SDK to generate a token to access our RDS. Okay? So that's the reason at some point of the class there will be something about token. Okay, so we are getting rid of the password. And we are going to use the AWS SDK to generate the token, because AWS and MySQL has agreed that in that protocol for that negotiation. I don't know now. But actually, this was not working for Microsoft Server. Sorry, Microsoft SQL Server 3 years ago. So they for whatever reason, the plugin that we're going to be using was not working, was not available for when what you have in your RDS is not MySQL, but Microsoft SQL Server. Okay? So that's also another reason why we create an instance of MySQL and not of Microsoft SQL Server, which we could have done it in our RDS. Okay? And that's it. Another thing that you will see is that since we decided to go token, then this guy, we need to say that when this guy connect, does not use a password, but actually use a token. Okay, we have to say that. That's another key point in the configuration, in the installation. And there is a complicated issue at some point, which is SSL, because the connection should be through that secure protocol, and we need to say that this guy is going to connect always using that. And in the case that we are using the command line interface, we need to add some files that needed for the SSL connection in our project, but not when we are doing it in Lambda, because Lambda already has those files. More or less clear what we are doing, right? Okay. So let's start. So I hope it's not too uncomfortable for you to work there. Okay, so what do we have? So the first thing we need we are going to do is to actually create a database, right? In our MySQL RDS. So we need to create a database. So we need to create a database, and we need to create a user for the database, and we need to create some div permission to the user of the database. Remember, this user is not IAM user, it's the user of your database. And these permissions are not IAM permission, are the permission, the typical permission of a user in your database that you typically give by using grant permission, blah, blah. Did you study that in your database course? Yes or no? Remember that I was not a teacher here, so I have no idea what you know and what you don't know. So if I say things that for you is like, I'm sorry, we don't know, ask me. Because I cannot read your mind. So you don't know what, so when I have been talking about users on database, you have no idea what I was talking about? Huh? Only well, no. Root user you should never use. So you have to create it. It's like in an operating system. You don't use the root to access your laptop. You create users and you give permission. And this is the same for any management, different syntax, but it's the same. And permissions means it's a very rich language to say this user can access this table, or can access this column, or can access, and you grant or revoke permission. Okay? So normally when you have a web application, suppose that you have a database, that contains many databases. Okay? You have a MySQL server, and there are many databases there. Let's say one database for each of your web apps, for each of your applications. You don't want to have the root for all of them. You basically need a user for each one of them. Okay? As an example. Okay, so since you have not done it, Now, how do you, so first problem, and that's the reason I told you that I hope you finish what we did last week. Now, how do we actually create a database on our RDS, and how do we actually create a user in our for that database? Well, we need to remotely, there is no other way, remotely access our RDS and then execute the commands, the SQL commands. Now, so first go and access your database. You can use whatever MySQL plugin from the laptop.
Vô database. Okay. So let me, before you run this, because you may want to modify a few things, let me explain. So this is my SQL code. Okay? I mean code, script. So what I'm doing here. So first, this means I am, give me a second. Right. Right. So here I am creating a user, Cloud26. You don't like the name, change it. This is a user for your RDS, for your database management system. Okay? This user will have permission for different databases, for different tables, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So I'm creating a user Cloud26, and this is key. So normally when you create a user for your database, or when you may have not done it, you create and you say how that user is going to identify itself. Normally you say with password. Then you say with password, the modern MySQL server requires you a number of things. Or you can say, in this case, I say it's going to be with a plugin. It's going to be with a different thing than a password. And I say AWS Authentication Plugin. This is a plugin that MySQL has agreed with AWS. So basically, AWS has provided the plugin, and then the latest, many years ago, or some years ago, version of MySQL are shipped with that plugin. Okay, so that by saying this means when this guy wants to connect to the database is gonna try to negotiate with whoever is calling to check that that guy is allowed to access by carrying out the negotiation with this client. Okay? Yes. So when you create a user in MySQL, that is the same. You need to say identify how. Okay. So now this is because we want the identification of that guy to be taken care of by AWS. Which, among other things, means we will not put the password anywhere in our code, not in a configuration file. And the credentials are going to be temporary. Okay? Now, of course, at some point, we will need to tell AWS that we are happy with this Lambda, accessing, requesting a connection with RDS for that user. And that is the information that this plugin is gonna, when MySQL asks AWS, hey, this guy wants to connect, I know that this guy is gonna connect, I'm gonna get the credentials by negotiating with you using this plugin, then AWS will do nothing unless knows that this guy can access that the owner of the Lambda and the owner of the RDS has said that yes, that guy can access. Okay? So that's the reason at some point today, a bit later, we will have to give to Lambda permission to connect to RDS, and specifically to connect to RDS using this guy or any other guy that you decide. Okay. If we don't do that, then basically means that anybody can access our database on AWS. Okay. Good. The next thing may basically say that this guy, I don't know if you have ever seen this, but basically means alter user means I'm modifying this guy, and I'm saying that this basically means from anywhere in the world. When you put at and this, and don't forget the quotes, okay? That basically means, and you have the ampersand there, means everywhere in the world, from any IP. Normally you don't do this. Normally you put localhost, or you put a specific IP, but for us it's okay. And then basically means that this guy, in addition to be identified with this plugin, which means that we gave permission in IAM, the connection must be through SSL. Okay, that's for security, and also I think it's a requirement. Got it? Did you do it? Does it work? That part? No, why? You have to connect. So you don't panic. So you have to connect, okay? So you have to do this. Give me a second. Right. So last week we stopped here, right? So you have now you don't have this. You use SQL Workbench or whatever you want. So this basically has the RDS, DB, blah, blah, blah. It is your data. So if I'm repeating things and you get bored, let me know. Just I cannot read your mind. So should I repeat this? So you basically have, so you connect to your AWS, sign into the console. so I guess all of you should have your DB instance. It may have a different name, whatever name you gave it. And then here, where it says endpoint, that's the endpoint. That's when either MySQL Workbench or your SQL client asks you for the host name. That's the host name. Okay? So that's the reason in my case I put HRDS blah blah. That's the host name. And then the user is, until now, you only have one user in your SQL, which is admin, and then you pass the password. And if you don't mind, I don't want to give you my password. So, okay? Sorry. Okay. Okay? So use my password. Right? So now means I'm inside, right? That means I am inside. I am inside my database, right? Now, inside your database, you execute the commands that I said. So you basically go here, and I'm gonna do it again because I did it already. You go here, copy, and paste. That's it. What? Oh my gosh. What are you using? Which client are you using? Which client are you using? Okay, you have all the problem is not loaded? Huh? Everybody has that problem, or someone doesn't have that problem? The problem is said plugin is not loaded.
Yes.
You had that problem? Someone does not have that problem? No. I don't remember. Okay. Yeah. You have to enable where? Here. Yes. Configuration. No, connectivity and security. Modify. Here, you have to do it that way. So go to the modify, and you have to pick that one, which basically means that we are allowing AWS to negotiate with the client. That should work now.
kéo xuống.
Thank you.
Chỗ nào?
Does it work now? Yes, I have it always, but I didn't double check.
Rồi xuống. Continue.
Does it work now?
Immediately.
Yes? Okay, does it work? Okay, so then again, let's try to do this. I mean, what you did before. Meaning, I'll create the user, and now that, and then say that you identify, and then do this. Okay? Yes? Can we move on? Yes? How many are here? I just want to know how many are. Raise your hand. Working. Not working yet. Why? Say. Cannot. Yes. Continue. Wait. Apply immediately. Yeah. It will take some time. No, wait. It takes some time. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that it's done. Go to the dashboard. Go here. You go too fast. Yeah, it's already working there. Why? Cannot connect on the app. No, but that's different. That's because you are not putting the. Wait. Right. But that's different, right? So go to the. Can I? Sorry, give me a second. This actually.
Trời ơi. Nhìn ngoại đại đi chứ.
Cái này dễ không ạ? Sao
Dễ,
tối qua
nếu mà
đọc không hiểu
dễ.
gì? Tối qua đọc không hiểu.
Nói chung là biểu hiện cái mục đích là để synchronize. Sorry, nói chung là mục đích là để synchronize hai cái tham màu. Ví dụ kiểu là trong hệ thống phán thì nếu mà thành công hiểu biết cái tham màu là nó sẽ chỉ
It happened with someone else last
phải
week.
combine,
You asked me why.
chứ thì phải cho bắt
So
để cho nó ra một cái
when
class
modifying
với cha ba cái phải có
modify the inbound.
nó sẽ dựa trên cái timestamp.
Last week,
Ví dụ
one of
là
you
cái
had the rule there, and it was not working. So we deleted the rule, put it again, working. The same thing that with you today.
thời
Don't
gian
ask me
nó
why.
thì nó thấy là một cái
Okay? Anybody else?
vậy nó sao đâu nhưng mà
Okay, so the next thing we're gonna
nó
do
sẽ không có thay đổi hết, nó sẽ không
is to actually create a database. It's a bit confusing when I say RDS is a database management system. So inside a database management system, you create databases. Okay? So we want a database for our application, and basically you will do more things later. But what we want is right now we have S3, and S3 has images. We have a key, right? And that's all we can do in S3. Now we're gonna have a database where essentially we're gonna have a table that contains the key, that guy, and the description. So we can say this image is from blah blah blah. Okay, and we're gonna have typical ID here, just as our primary. Okay, so we're going to create a database that contains a table that contains 3 columns: ID, key, and description. And the idea is that every time, next week, or maybe today, I don't know, depending on how fast you go, every time we add an object to S3, we create a row in the database that contains not only the key of the object, but also the description. And that's the typical thing in a web application. You have a database that actually you have all the information, but the files are somewhere else. But obviously you need to connect the information in the database with the, make sense? Yes? Okay, so, so of course you can do it by yourself, but this is a command, this is a statement, an SQL statement to create a database. So I'm creating a database, I call it Cloud26. You can change the name, every single time you change the name, remember to change the name everywhere else. So I'm creating a database Cloud20, the default character set is UTF-8, why? Because that's normal, and B, we are in Vietnam, so for sure you're going to put description in Vietnamese. And then I'm going to use default collate UTF general CI, which basically means that for the comparisons, I'm gonna take into consideration that the characters are UTF-8. Okay, you can see the explanation there. That's the typical thing that you will lose a lot of times sometimes. Okay, if you don't put the collate properly, then your code will not work. If you are dealing with things different from us. Okay, so this command should work for you, right? Yes? Yes? Okay, next. So what do we have now? So we have the database, sorry, we have the RDS, we have a user, we have a database that we're going to use for our application, and in that database we have, not yet, now we're going to create, next. We already did that, so sorry, we just need this one. So this means, this is again, SQL statement. So this means you, who remember are the admin, are giving all privileges on everything in that database. Normally you will put on this table, on this column, but here we are being very lazy and say for everything in that database to the user Cloud26 connecting from everywhere, from anywhere. That's the meaning of that statement. Okay? One thing is to create the user, another thing is to give permission to the user. So that, obviously, if you don't have this guy or you don't have that database, this will fail. But I guess you have it. Was it working? Yes? This is a reminder of database course, okay? This has nothing to do with, until now, has nothing to do with this part, except for the plugin with cloud computing. This you will have to do it anywhere you do a database, you work with databases. Then I don't need this because we did it before. Right, now, next. This means, use Cloud26 means that what comes from now after affect or has to do with the database Cloud26 which you have created. You don't do this guy will complain because doesn't know where to put the table. Okay, so you do that, and the last thing we need, I think, no, almost the last, is I am creating a table, let's call it photos, which have the 3 columns that I say, the ID, which is going to be auto-increment primary key, the description, which is going to be a text, and shouldn't be null. This is wrong. So please don't Let me change this, okay? This is the problem with copy and paste from my own code. So yes, I don't need this guy, but also this unique is not needed. I mean, nothing wrong with it, but it's not needed. And then, yeah, okay? Yeah. Right. So basically, I increase that description as a non-null, and the S, I call it S3 key, so I don't get confused. That's the key on S3. It's going to be a bar chart. For I say default is going to be empty string. Now I know that S3 key is going to be unique, and I may be tempted to use this guy actually as the primary key. I could do that. However, and that's the decision of the architect. But in my case, since the strings that can be used as key in S3 could be anything. Okay? As far as I think there's no restriction. I just prefer to keep my life simple and then have the ID, which is an int, which is going to be always faster in terms of comparison and decision. Okay? That's it. And the last thing is just to see that it works, then make an insert, modify this. Take this, one of your key in S3, and put in the description whatever you want. That's the one that I have for myself. That's it. Working. It should work. The what? The what?
To create a user. Still,
What does it say?
create user cloud26 identified with AWS notification error.
The what?
I guess just an error.
What that can be the syntax. It cannot be the. Are you copying the text exactly? Yeah.
No, I just
What? Yeah. You have a table there, right? So you should be able to see the table. Okay. Done. Right. So now you have in your RDS, you have a database, you have a table, and you have a row. Right? So now we need to let's say that we want a lambda that connect to the database, get the row, respond with that information to a request. Okay? Once you know how to do that, that's it. You can build any web application on AWS, because that's basically database and storage. Right. So I put this code. I hope it works, but let me first explain the code. Okay? This is the lambda. This is the code for the lambda. So don't do it now. Do it later after I finish explaining, so I can also help others. And you will have to create a new project. You modify the font, as I will explain in a moment. Then you add this code. Then you compile, build, create the lambda, upload the code, and it should work. Okay? Now this code, let's see, what do I have here? So this is exactly what we have done all the time, right? So this is a lambda that implement this interface exactly as we did before. So it's gonna accept an API gateway proxy request event. We're going to use a function URL, which basically means it's going to be behind an API gateway. And then the API gateway as a response. Okay, so that's exactly as before. Now these are my constants that I'm going to use later, and of course you have to modify. So you will have to put here your endpoint. Okay? You will have, this is the same, we are using the same form. If you have modified the SQL user, I call it Cloud26, but if you have modified, you will have to modify. And this basically, it means I'm going to connect on this JDBC URL. I'm using this one. And this guy, if you have modified, if you wanted to call the database anything different, right? So you will have to modify that. Right. So as always, the key thing on this lambda is the method handle request. Okay, that's the one that is going to be used. It's going to be executed by the AWS when there is a request for this lambda. So this code, we saw it already. It's just to get the connection to CloudWatch. Then, because I'm going to be returning a JSON array, this is my code. You can modify this code if you don't like my style. I am going to emphasize the key things to modify. Now I'm using, this is the typical, okay? This is the typical connection from Java to SQL database. You use the driver, you say with which implementation you're going to be using. I'm going to use this implementation, which I put in the dependency later. Then I get a connection, I pass the full DBC URL, and then this is key. I put a few properties which are important, and the properties are here. So I say the connection is going to be use SSL, because that's a requirement, I believe, for the plugin to work. Then the user is the user that we say above, and the password is not password, is the token generated by this. Okay? In the typical use of a driver in Java, you will put here the password. Now we don't put the password. The password is automatically generated, it's a token. Okay? And that token is defined here, and basically what it does is, this is a class from AWS, as expected. So, right, this is a token that AWS is going to negotiate with SQL using the plugin. So obviously all this code is AWS code. So I'm using this class with a builder build, and then the token is actually this guy generate authentication token, and I have to pass some information. The information is what is the database, what is the port, who is the MySQL user who want to access, what is the region, and then here is, who are you for me, AWS, to give you a token? What are your credentials? And then I'm using default credential provider. Why? Because it's gonna be Lambda. So this is gonna be executing Lambda. So Lambda is gonna be the one that is going to give the credentials to to this guy, to RDS, to negotiate. That's the reason later on we will have to give Lambda the permission to connect to RDS. Okay? We try to get all this information from the documentation. It takes a while. Okay? But the good thing is that there is no password anywhere. There is no password anywhere in the code. Okay? And for the thing to work, two things. The Lambda, in our case the Lambda, need to have, through IAM, permission to connect to the database, and we should have, of course, created the database with a user, which is the one that we are going to tell Lambda. With that you can, and that user need to have permission in MySQL, in our MySQL database management system, to access whatever table we want to access, whatever we want to. Okay? And that's it. And then the code is as expected. So you create the connection with this. Then I guess you know how to use prepare statements. You have used it, right? Right. So what is a prepare statement? What is this? And why we use it? Anybody? What is a SQL injection?
It's like when the user enter into a field, it's like for a field, ask the user to enter their name and phone number, but instead they enter a simple query that in turn is gonna be executed and return the password or something and let them illegally log in.
Should I explain what she said, or everybody is familiar with this? So the problem in a web application is that at some point you go to an API, and that API at some point gonna connect to the database and it's going to execute some statement, right? Many times, this statement, not now, but this statement will actually contain strings that are coming from the user. You ask for the user some information, and then you take that information and put it in the statement, right? Right? So, in the old times, in the good old times, you will have something like this, and then you will say plus, and then some string coming from the user. Now, most of the users are good users, but some of the users are bad users. So, basically, if the user decides in the string to put that, for example, SQL has no idea if that is part of the query or is the end of the statement. So it will, for example, stop there. And then if the user is a bad guy, and not only do that, but also put something else afterwards that it will be executed afterwards, then you get an SQL injection, meaning you could crash the database, you get information on the database, you can do a lot of things. Okay? Now, to avoid that, you use, before you actually execute, you take what you want. In this case, it's unproblematic because everything is fixed. But you will see in other, when we advance in the web application, that it is not the case, that we are putting some information here which is not at compile time. So you take whatever you want and then you say prepare a statement, which means sanitize. Before you execute this, put all the escape characters needed so that no bad things could happen when I execute this. Okay, so that's a prepare statement. And any library that connects to database from Python or whatever has something like that. You don't directly put the string. You could, you should. When the string contains information coming from the user, which you do not control. Okay? That's the reason the prepare statement is there. And then this is just Java code. So I got the result set, which is the object that allows me to iterate and get, using an iterator, get every row that is returned by this guy. And then I just build a JSON object with the ID, with the description, with the S3 key, and then I put that JSON object in my JSON array. If there's an error because the class has not been found, the class means this guy, this guy. Then I return, I put in the CloudWatch, and any other place I put it, and if everything is okay, I base64 encode the JSON array. That's the way to do it. One of the ways to do it, you get the byte, you pass it to a string, you get the byte, you encode the bytes with the encoder base64. You put it here, it's a string, and then you just return the string with content type application JSON. And it should be the case that if everything goes well, you will get this when you execute the lambda. Okay, that's my table. So we will make that lambda function URL, and then you just connect and you get the thing. Okay, so that's the end of the story. Right? Okay. So I'm gonna do the following. I think you need for this to work. Let me just give you the form. I have called this project Lambda Get Photos DB. I just do DB so I don't confuse with other things. You can do whatever you want. Just be consistent. And then the font. So I'm just going to copy from properties down. just remember that the POM, I'm just copying so that you don't get, in case you want to change, I just copy from properties down, okay? So above this is when you create the Maven project, you will put some XML there, just leave it as it is, and then from properties down, you can copy this. So basically, the key thing is that we already had that from previous things. The new thing is this guy. That is the dependencies that give me access to the RDS method. Then you need this. This is the dependency to get the driver, to get the implementation of the implementation of the data. How do you call it? The driver manager. Okay? So the implementation of that, so this guy, this class, is in that dependency. So that's the reason you need it. And then I have, because I'm using JSON, I have the JSON, and that's it. Okay? So create the project, the Maven project, put the POM, get the code, modify whatever you need to modify in the code, and then compile. And you should compile at least. It will not work yet in the Lambda, but you should compile. And in the break, I will help anybody who is not working, if the data is not working. Working? So what is where is the problem? Which of them you are like to wizard? Is it working now? Yolanda. But the database is working. He told me that it was not working.
Con gái trên Steam không trả lời.
Gì vậy?
Working? Not yet? Put it in Lambda. It's not gonna work. But if we give permission to work, okay, but we can do it. Okay, so we can take a break now, and then if anybody is like not working, I'm here. Just let me know. Okay.
Mình được chưa? Mình đã được chưa?
So we take a break, okay?
Được rồi. Ủa sao được hay vậy? Rồi vậy bấm vô cái function URL thôi. Chưa tạo function URL nữa. Bấm vô không chưa được. Thôi mình nó không được. Hello phòng Lâm Đà. Quên. Gì chưa? Chắc lắm. Thấy này vô. Bảo phát chiếc xịt chấm lambda get o db rồi cục block rồi sao em làm từ bấm vô cái function URL đi được không? Rồi ấn độ rồi.
Cái nào?
Passage forbidden rồi.
Cái này là có quy định.
Có nghĩa là